Russian forces staged a massive drone attack on Kharkiv, which is Ukraine's second largest city, killing 4 people and injuring several others. Rescue efforts for people trapped in the rubble are currently underway. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has hailed the tremendous progress made in talks with his Ukrainian counterpart in Geneva as the U.S. and Ukraine have put forward an updated proposal for peace between Ukraine and Russia. With less than 8 months left on its mandate, the Office of Personnel Management has now stated that the Department of Government Efficiency, once headed by billionaire Elon Musk, is no longer operational. French President Emmanuel Macron has met with his counterpart Brice Oligui Nguema from Gabon in Libreville. The two leaders reaffirmed their commitment to a reinvented partnership following bilateral talks. Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi has stated that she is open to talks with China amidst a rapidly escalating diplomatic row between the two countries following her remarks on Taiwan. At least 3 people have been killed in what is being described as a suicide bombing in Pakistan's Peshawar. The target of the attack was a Pakistani paramilitary force headquarters in the city. More than 11,000 people in 7 Malaysian states have been affected by flooding caused by torrential rain. A report from the National Disaster Management Agency has showcased that 11,009 people from 3,839 families have been affected. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskiy has stated that his country and his people are very grateful to U.S. President Donald Trump following the peace plan draft agreed upon by representatives of the two countries in Geneva. All right, viewers, those are the headlines, and we're tracking some breaking updates on the broadcast at the moment. Authorities in Pakistan's northwestern city of Peshawar have in fact reported that the headquarters of Pakistan's Federal Constabulary in Peshawar has come under major attack, with explosions and heavy gunfire reported from the area. According to reports, the Peshawar capital city police has emphasized that the headquarters was under attack and that police and security teams had rushed to the spot following initial reports of an explosion and gunfire. Now, according to sources, a suicide bomber detonated himself at the main gate of the facility and 2 other bombers entered the compound. Immediately after the blast, intense firing was heard from inside and around the compound. With us on the broadcast is Ajay Jandal, our Jammu Bureau Chief, joining us. Ajay, over to you. What is the latest that you're tracking? Sources are coming in that 3 people have lost their lives.
But the attack was in such a way which basically was something which security forces of Pakistan could not have foiled it. So that's why, first attacker, he blown up himself on the main gate, and 2 others, they entered the premises of the paramilitary forces of Pakistan, and immediately when they entered inside, they started targeting the security forces. That's why there are apprehension that about 2 to 3 people, they have lost their life in this attack. No doubt that after first, suicide bomber, he blown up himself. He lost his life on the main gate, and 2 other, those who are inside this forces, compound over there. They are still, inside the camp, inside the building, and they are fight between the security forces of Pakistan and the two suicide bombers that is going on. Till now, there is no official, information by the Pakistani forces that how much people they have lost, and what is the status of the suicide bomber, whether they are killed or they are alive. That is, not shared. But the sources are saying that there are possibilities that 2 suicide bombers they are killed, but 1 is still inside the building who is fighting with the security forces person.
All right, Ajay, with that, I'd like to thank you for taking our time, of course, sharing all of those details with our viewers. This is a developing story. We will continue to track all of these updates. But of course, latest sources have indicated that 3 people have lost their lives in this suicide bombing. Shifting focus to more news, we're tracking Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskiy has now expressed deep gratitude to the United States and President Donald Trump for their continued support in Ukraine's fight against Russia. Zelensky has thanked the US for its assistance, noting that weapons such as the Javelin anti-tank missiles had been crucial in saving Ukrainian lives. This follows comments from Donald Trump, who earlier accused Ukrainian leaders of offering zero gratitude for US aid. Zelensky has also extended his thanks to Europe, the G7 and the G20, emphasizing the importance of maintaining international support as Ukraine continues to defend itself against Russian forces. Now, in a positive development, Zelensky has noted that the ongoing dialogue with US officials has been productive, with indications that the Trump administration is listening to Ukraine's concerns. As discussions continue, Zelensky has emphasized that the coming days will be crucial, with Ukraine focused on ensuring that any peace plan upholds its sovereignty and security. With us on the broadcast is Professor Veselin Popovsky. He's a professor and vice dean of Jindal Global Law School. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. We've learned that following the meeting between Marco Rubio and Ukrainian counterparts in Geneva, an updated proposal is now in the works. It's being finalized. Trump has, of course, given a deadline of Thursday. The original proposal was quite contentious. It was being seen as being lenient towards Russia, especially as far as expectations from Ukraine to cede territory and to also abandon its NATO ambitions are concerned. Could we see then with this new updated proposal being a little more lenient towards the Ukrainians' concerns?
Yes, certainly. The first proposal was obviously inadequate because it gratifies the aggressor. Vladimir Putin wants extra territories. He wants to limit Ukrainian army. Basically, it's a preparation for the next war, which Putin will start in a year or two and conquer the entire Ukraine. Absolutely unacceptable. By the way, there were leakages that it was written in Moscow. The translation from Russia was very visible. Effectively, Vitkov simply forwarded what he received from Dmitriev to some officials in the State Department. There was a leak, and apparently those 28 points were the points Russia drafted without any opinions even from the US administration. Later they denied that, but currently, as you said, last night in Geneva, there were very productive talks. The Europeans and Ukraine made sure that any peace agreement will respect the Ukrainian sovereignty and territorial integrity and will not limit any choices the Ukrainian parliament, by the way, it's for the Ukrainian people and the parliament to decide what size of an army they want, what membership they want, the European Union membership, the NATO membership. These are all issues that have absolutely nothing to do with Trump or Putin or anybody else in the world. So it will be a long process. I don't expect by Thursday, by Thanksgiving. All this ultimatum by Trump mean nothing. He never stick to any of those. The process is long because Russia doesn't surrender. It doesn't move. It keeps asking what it cannot achieve in the military battlefield. They want everything, but they don't accept the responsibility for the start of the war, for the many war crimes, for the destruction of Ukraine and everything else. So it will be a difficult process, not easy, not short, and it will take some more time.
Indeed, and a quick follow-up to that as well. We'd seen that Ukraine's allies in Europe had in fact slammed the proposal. They were not satisfied with what was drafted. They in fact contended that they were not involved in the process whatsoever. They released a counter-proposal which included a NATO-style guarantee from the United States for Ukraine if it is attacked, which is basically in line with Article 5 of the Charter. Would America have included such a guarantee, such a proposal that has been mooted by the Europeans, or would it look at its own interests first?
Yes, certainly. This is now serious. What the Europeans did was a very proper redrafting of the proposal and guaranteeing that no war will follow after this one, that Ukraine will have all the choices, as I mentioned. It will have the security guarantees, and so on. So obviously the things go into the right way after that inadequate first 28 points planned by Washington, and things will move into the right direction. Obviously, Ukraine is not alone, and by the way, not only Europeans, many countries in the world, like Canada, Australia, Japan, South Korea, and many, many other law-abiding countries. I will put it this way: international law will not accept that deal that Donald Trump is trying to propose. He has nothing to say to the world, even, not only to the Europeans, by doing these erratic and hectic mistakes. And he asked Zelensky to be to gratify him. Like a small child, he needs somebody to cuddle him and to express thanks all the time. But that's Donald Trump. We know him very well. So nothing can be expected from Washington in the next year or two until kind of things change and a normal president come to the White House.
Indeed, sir. With that, I'd like to thank you for taking our time, of course, sharing your analysis with us. On that note, viewers, let's also listen in to what President Volodymyr Zelenskiy has had to say.
Важливо, що розмова з американськими представниками є, і є сигнали, що команда президента Трампа чує нас. Завтра теж не менш активний день. Інтереси України захищаємо, і сила нашої позиції, сила нашої державної позиції, народної української позиції в тому, що це наша спільна позиція. Єдність українців у захисті своїх національних інтересів і нашої незалежності, нашого суверенітету. Це те, що спрацьовує. Є директиви для української делегації, є український напрямок, по якому делегація іде, і дуже хотілося б, щоб протилежних сигналів, щоб не українських сигналів.
In other news, we're tracking from the United States of America. The Trump administration has disbanded the Department of Government Efficiency with 8 months still remaining in its mandate. The agency was established as a flagship initiative to slash federal agencies and reduce government size, but it reportedly delivered few measurable savings. Now, the Office of Personnel Management, a U.S. federal government agency, has confirmed that DOGE is no longer a centralized entity and that it has now taken over many of DOGE's functions. Meanwhile, several prominent DOGE employees have moved to the National Design Studio, which was created by Trump to improve its government websites. DOGE had earlier claimed to have cut billions of dollars in expenditure, but outside experts could not really verify the figures due to limited public accounting. However, the Trump administration and its officials have still not formally announced DOGE's end, although its functions and hiring freeze have remained phased out over the past couple of months. Moreover, as per reports, Republican-led states including Idaho and Florida are also creating local entities modeled after DOGE to manage their bureaucracy and budget cuts as well. We all know that DOGE was established right after Donald Trump had taken oath as president for the second time earlier this year. It was established through an executive order signed the moment he resumed the presidency. Its leaders formerly were Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. But of course, over the months, there have been reports of DOGE losing its operational independence. In fact, Musk was earlier given such a free hand that USAID was shut down as well. But of course, the tiff seems to have been between Trump and Musk seemed to have been a turning point. With us on the broadcast is Mr. Spencer Critchley, communications strategist, joining us from California. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. DOGE was, of course, positioned in the run-up to Trump taking office as one of the most disruptive undertakings of his second term in office, but now it's been disbanded with 8 months still left in its official mandate. How do you read into this, and what does this really say about the Trump administration's style of operations?
Well, I think DOGE was a tragic failure that instead of saving costs, imposed enormous costs, including in terms of the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. And this is something that is just too often swept under the rug as people move on to the next story. But if you stop and think about the impact of just shutting down the U.S. Agency for International Development, reliable estimates put the cost in lives in the hundreds of thousands. One closely tracked monitor at Boston University estimates 600,000 deaths already. An internal memo by a DOJ whistleblower a few months ago estimated, I think it was 200,000 cases of paralytic polio among children just in the coming year or so. This apparently is no burden whatsoever on Elon Musk's or Donald Trump's consciences. Those consciences seem to be missing. Even the very name Doge is an adolescent joke based on the Doge crypto coin.
Absolutely.
And Musk's understanding of politics and policy seems to be that of a teenage boy who gets most of his picture of the world from science fiction novels. One tech expert who knows it well describes him as the world's most powerful 15-year-old, and I think that kind of overestimates his emotional age. I can't say enough negative about the whole enterprise of Doge. Of course, they failed to achieve any meaningful cost savings in the federal government. They didn't bother to learn how the federal government works before launching on this chainsaw-style cost cutting they were so proud about. And then they lied about the results, ultimately, apparently achieving trivial results financially, but as I say, murderous results in terms of the human costs. And that's just with USAID. There have been other more or less severe impacts in the United States and around the world as a result of it.
Indeed, I request you to stay on with us. I'd also like to point out some statistics because publicly, Doge had claimed large-scale fiscal achievements. At its peak, in fact, Musk had set a record of trimming $1 trillion from the federal deficit by the end of September 2025, which of course has not been achieved. The target is far from fulfilled. Doge's website listed about $214 billion in savings, although reports have indicated that these numbers had been inconsistently represented or even overstated. Now, across agencies, as Mr. Critchley have pointed out, the consequences of Doge's interventions were varied. It did not just impact the beneficiaries of USAID, but also the government employees. The workload had grown exponentially, capacities had shrunk, and in many cases, programs had halted entirely. I wanted to understand from you, we did quite see the public spat between Donald Trump and Elon Musk over Truth Social and the comments that were made on X as well with regards to the disagreement over the one big beautiful bill. Was that then the turning point in the operation of the Department of Government Efficiency?
That appeared to be a big part of it. Musk was extremely upset by what he saw as ironically, the fiscal profligacy of the so-called big beautiful bill, which was just an enormous tax cut and giveaway to the richest people in America, while saddling the United States with more debt than had ever been created by any president ever in history. In fact, Trump by himself has created more debt than all of the previous American presidential administrations combined. And the benefits have overwhelmingly flowed to the people who need it the least.
Indeed, and he's walked back on his promises that were made in the run-up to him securing the second term. So I request you to stay on with us as we're tracking some other developments. U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem has now announced a review of the Temporary Protected Status Program to ensure it aligns with its original intent as a temporary measure and not an asylum program. Noem has emphasized that the administration will follow the legal process to assess TPS designations for different countries. Listen in to what she had to say.
Well, TPS is a program that was always meant to be temporary. It's a program that is put in place, and I believe for Somalia over 30 years ago, and will need to be evaluated to make sure that it comes and is always implemented in the process for which it was intended. So that's something that will go forward. And I know that the president wants to bring integrity to our programs and make sure that they're applied appropriately to the individuals and to the countries to which they're supposed to be.
The review has followed President Donald Trump's decision to immediately terminate TPS for Somalis in Minnesota. Trump has cited concerns over Somali gangs, as he claims, and missing funds, but provided no evidence to support these claims. TPS for Somalis, which began in 1991 under President George H.W. Bush, had been extended by President Joe Biden until March 2026. TPS grants temporary protection to individuals unable to return safely to their home countries due to conflict or disaster. While 17 countries are currently eligible, the Trump administration has moved to end TPS for several, including Venezuela and Nicaragua. There are, in fact, some 705 Somalis with TPS, mostly in Minnesota, compared to over 330,000 Haitians and 170,000 Salvadorans with TPS. Shifting focus to what's taking place in the Middle East, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has stated that Israel will not allow Hezbollah to rebuild its military forces and expects the Lebanese government to disarm the group. This has come hours after an Israeli airstrike on a southern suburb of Beirut targeted Haytham Ali Tabatabai, Hezbollah's acting chief of staff. Now, the strike was the first near the Lebanese capital in months and took place despite a U.S.-brokered truce, which has been in place for about a year. It was inked back in November 2024. Hezbollah has not yet confirmed Tabtabai's death, although a senior official has stated that a central figure had been targeted and called the strike a red line. Lebanon's President Joseph Aoun is calling on the international community to step in and stop further Israeli attacks. Listen in.
חיסל את עלי טבטבאי, רמטכ"ל ארגון הטרור חיזבאללה. טבטאי הוא רב מרצחים. ידיו מגואלות בדם של ישראלים ואמריקנים רבים. ולא בכדי, ארצות הברית הציעה פרס כספי של $5 מיליון על הראש שלו. טבטאי שימש כמפקד בכיר בכוח רדואן, זה הכוח שהתכונן לכבוש את הגליל ולשחוט הרבה מאזרחינו. לאחרונה הוא הוביל את חידוש המאמצים של חיזבאללה להתחמש מחדש. זה כמובן לאחר המכות הקשות שחיזבאללה ספג במבצע הביפרים בפגיעה במאגרי הטילים שלו, וכמובן בחיסול נסראללה. אני מודה לצה"ל ולכוחות הביטחון שביצעו היום פעולה מקצועית, מדויקת ומוצלחת. המדיניות שאני מוביל ברורה לחלוטין. תחת הנהגתי, מדינת ישראל לא תאפשר לחיזבאללה לבנות את כוחו מחדש, ולא נאפשר לו לחזור להוות איום על מדינת ישראל. אני מצפה מממשלת לבנון לממש את ההתחייבות שלה, לפרק את חיזבאללה מנשקו, כי רק כך יתאפשר לכל אזרח בלבנון עתיד טוב יותר, ורק כך תוכל להתקיים שכנות טובה, בטוחה, בין ישראל ללבנון. בהזדמנות הזאת אני רוצה גם לשבח את הנשיא טראמפ על ההחלטה שלו להוציא אל מחוץ לחוק ולהגדיר את ארגון האחים המוסלמים כארגון טרור. זה ארגון שמסכן את היציבות ברחבי המזרח התיכון וגם מעבר למזרח התיכון. ולכן מדינת ישראל כבר הוציאה חלק מהארגון אל מחוץ לחוק, ואנחנו עובדים להשלים את הפעולה הזאת בקרוב.
Still with us on the broadcast is Mr. Spencer Critchley. We, of course, just heard Benjamin Netanyahu speak after the strike. He's warned that he will not allow the Hezbollah and its elite Radwan forces to regroup. The ceasefire was inked last year, but nothing much has really happened on that front because we are seeing consistent action by the IDF targeting Hezbollah infrastructure in southern Lebanon. Its forces have not really withdrawn as they were expected to under the plan. Hezbollah has neither disarmed as well. Where do you see this situation heading to next? Because the Israelis are now seeming to take the issue into their own hands and have struck Beirut.
Yes, and regional experts had predicted that it might come to this in short order. It caught many observers by surprise when the government of Lebanon put forward this proposal that Hezbollah disarm and in exchange Israel would withdraw from Lebanon. However, there was little faith that Hezbollah would actually cooperate, even if they expressed some initial interest in it. Most people predicted that Hezbollah would do whatever it could to delay actually going through with the disarmament. But it's been clear for quite some time that Israel is not going to tolerate the presence of an armed Hezbollah there and is not interested in withdrawing first and has no reason to trust Hezbollah's intentions there. I wish there were more reason to trust Benjamin Netanyahu. I think that Israel has a right to defend itself against Hezbollah. Hezbollah is a terrorist organization. The government of Lebanon itself wants to be free of Hezbollah, a heavily armed presence, a non-governmental heavily armed presence within that country, which takes over authority from the government of Lebanon and unilaterally makes decisions to attack Israel, for example. In the course of fighting Hezbollah, though, and defending Israel, Israel would be in a much stronger position if the government of Israel had more moral authority. But unfortunately, the corruption of Netanyahu and the cruelty with which his administration has pursued its actions in Gaza and in the West Bank has greatly diminished that moral authority.
Absolutely. And speaking of the Hezbollah at large and the attempts to disarm it, we'd seen initially the US a couple of months ago, I believe August, had given a deadline by the 31st to sort of chalk out a plan. That, of course, did not materialize. Hezbollah then outrightly denied any sort of efforts to disarm. We do know that their top leadership has more or less been completely wiped out by the Israelis. The funding from Iran has also been cut down substantially after the 12-day war. And we also recently, interestingly, saw a statement by the US Special Envoy to Syria, Tom Barak, who also has Lebanese origins. He stated, in light of all of this, that Lebanon is a failed state. Do you concur with him?
Yes, I do. I mean, it's a real tragedy as well, because Lebanon is such a beautiful country and has really achieved heights of civilization, as have, of course, other parts of the Middle East. There was a time when Iraq was the global center of civilization. It's terrible to see this happening in Lebanon, but if you don't have a monopoly on violence for a start, as the sociologist Max Weber pointed out in the early 20th century, if the government does not have a monopoly on the use of violence, you don't really have a functioning state. And that is the case in Lebanon, where you have Hezbollah as a more powerful military entity than the legitimate government of Lebanon. So that's for a start. And then when you have this division into sectarian factions, with the risk of disputes devolving into violence at all times, the weakness of civil society and trust in civil society institutions, we have to consider that to be at least a non-functioning or dysfunctional state, if not a failed state.
All right, so with that, I'd like to thank you for taking out time, of course, sharing your perspective and analysis with all of our viewers in these very crucial developments. On that note, viewers, we're shifting focus away from what's taking place in the Middle East. We're now learning that Bosnian Serb voters have elected Sinisa Karen, a close ally of ousted leader Milorad Dodik, to succeed him after months of political turbulence. Preliminary results show Karen leading with just over 50% of the vote, ahead of opponent Branko Planusa. The snap election came after Dodik was removed from office following his conviction for defying rulings by international peace envoy Christian Smith. Now, Dodik's nationalist SNSD party has dominated the Serb-led Republika Srpska for nearly 2 decades, and this result is now being seen as a measure of his continued influence. Karen, a former interior minister and Dodik's hand-picked successor, will serve less than a year before the next general election in October 2026. Listen in to what Sinisa Karen had to say on his victory.
Hvala našem narodu I našim građanima što su institucijama Republike Srpske dali snažnu moć, da imamo još više snage I moći da se borimo protiv svih onih koji žele da naude Republici Srpskoj. Republika Srpska nije nikome pretnja, nikome, to stalno ponavljam. Mir I stabilnost su naš prioritet, a Republika Srpska...
The main opposition party in the Bosnian Serb entity, the SDS, has now accused the ruling SNSD of election fraud after the party's candidate, Karen claimed victory in the early presidential election. The SDS says the result cannot be considered legitimate and is calling for a full investigation into voting procedures and ballot counting. The dispute comes amid wider political turmoil in Republika Srpska, where Dodik's party has long dominated but now faces intensifying scrutiny. The controversy is likely to heighten tensions both within the entity and across Bosnia's fragile power-sharing system as opposition leaders press for transparency and international oversight. Take a look.
Mogu reći da sam vrlo zadovoljan ostvarenim rezultatom i sasvim siguran sam da nije bilo ovih izbornih manipulacija o kojima su govorili moji prethodnici, da bih ja večeras već mogao da proglasim izbornu pobjedu.
On that